Mega Man X is one of the greatest games ever made, and this year I've decided to start down the path of playing through the other games in the franchise, which I've never played. So far, I've replayed X while doing a Robot Master Randomizer run and played X2 for the first time, and today, my friend John and I will be playing Mega Man X3.
I love the tiny health it
My
gives me.
name's Brian. YouTube channel.
You're not... I'm zooming in on that.
No! Stop.
You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and if you are new to the channel, there's one thing you need to know about my reviews. I play games as close to guideless as possible, and in this playthrough of X3, John and I played the game completely guideless. Without hints, without secret location guides, and without knowing the optimal Robot Master route, he and I beat our head against this astoundingly difficult game until we reached Sigma. Before we dive right in, let's take a look at past Brian and John to see what they were thinking going into the game.
I'm just hoping the weapons are good. That's really it. I'm gonna try to stay positive throughout. Last time I was tired and just very negative Nancy at the end there.
Yeah. Stayed up too long with coffee. If you didn't see the last video with the little marker there, coffee.
Either it was implied that very likely like I was like, because of John being in a drunken haze, he was unable to get proper sleep. No, it's because I drank coffee like a dumbass. I was tired, and hopefully this time around, I'm just more positive. If in general, just honestly, as long as like, at least 4 weapons are usable, I'll be a happy John.
As long as at least 4 weapons are usable, it actually is above X2 in terms of usable weapons.
It'll be better.
And like I said in the last video, like your weapon usability, level design, and boss design are like the 3 metrics of a good Mega Man game. And so, you know, I think one of those could be kind of little bit lower if the others make up for it. But, you know, X, it's like, in Mega Man X, it was like it had 1 bad weapon, maybe. I don't really even know. I think they're all kind of okay, at least.
They're all usable.
They're all usable.
Like, if anything, they could just be projectiles. Like, I mean, even if they weren't like the best projectiles, they could be used as projectiles, as opposed to Mega Man X2, where you're just like, this one's a chain that goes exactly 3 inches in front of Mega Man, so you can try to poke an enemy at point blank range, or you can fire a weapon and then wait for it to despawn. And you're like, it's just like, it's awkward. And you just Mega Man 1, Mega Man X, I guess, fucking everything was at least able to kill what's on the screen, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so we're hoping for something like that. We'll see how it goes.
And yeah, if at least 4 of the weapons are good, the levels aren't too bad, and the bosses are fun, this game will be better than X2 in my mind. So how about we dive right into the experience?
Alright, John, get in there.
Except for it's making me. Oh god, no! This is the intro. That's not me playing.
Oh.
That literally is. It's like I'm like watching this. And I'm like, that's not me.
This is why I want this bar set up.
Bro, because I mean, like fucking. It's like I'm like a kid who's just been handed like the control and like, yo, you're playing right now. I'm
Oh
like,
my
boy.
god.
Starting out, X3 impresses a bit less than X2 based on its opening level. X2's first level starts out with this awesome bike assault sequence, and within the level itself, there are these attractive mechanics where Mega Man can be magnetized to the floor by this conveyor belt thing. I like design elements like this because interactivity with the environment is a completely underrated type of game design and gameplay mechanic. Also, the X3 intro falls a bit short of the first X game because the gameplay doesn't start as immediately. X is the first game I played as a kid, and it always blew me away how immediately the control of Mega Man fell to the player. It's possible the decision to slow down the opening just a tad is reflective of shifting gaming trends from the 90s, as stories in games became an important focus of game development through the mid to late 90s era. Since I played the opening level for X2, John took control this time around, and later on in the level, the player's control switches from controlling Mega Man to controlling Zero. This is such a cool idea, and this thing on its own saves my first impression of X3. At first, I thought this was going to lead to Zero being a more active character in X3's general gameplay.
Hold on.
I'm gonna stab a bitch.
Sword is cool.
Well, of course it's cool.
I think the fact that they put more into his design makes me think you'll play him again for sure.
And yes, Zero is playable in X3, but John and I didn't know you could switch to him throughout our whole playthrough of X3. We didn't realize there was a second menu in the game until it was too late for us to be able to actually play as Zero. I speculate this is something the game manual, that games from the PS2 era backwards would always have, probably explains this mechanic, but since John and I played X3 via the Mega Man X Legacy Collection, we never knew this was a thing. I may have missed something, but I don't think this mechanic is ever explained in the game itself, though it is possible we missed a text box or something like that.
Hey buddy, bye buddy. He's just like, okay, I'm doing my job.
You know, in terms of practicality, a sword that you have to like take 3 seconds to charge up is not an practical sword at all.
And obviously this doesn't actually impact the value of playing as Zero or anything like that, but I do wish that he was designed more as a hard-focused melee character, rather than essentially being Mega Man with a few extra bells and whistles. If Zero returns for X4, this is something I would like to see improved upon in that game. The boss of this opening level is somehow less impressive than the boss of X2's first level, which is pretty shocking.
Wow, this guy is so lazy.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh. He doesn't do anything.
I'm afraid, Brian, I'm afraid.
Oh, just put him out of his
Oh,
misery.
but look at how big he is. He's a big guy with a mustache. You can't hurt him. Okay, one more block. Come on. This one right here. Get this one. I'm gonna die because of this stupid shit. I'm gonna kill him.
My god, what a ridiculous thing to have to watch you do.
I feel so epic. I defeated the big boy.
And honestly, it feels like Capcom was trying to gaslight the player with this opening level because of how easy it is. At first, I thought this game was going to be comparable with X2 in terms of difficulty, but as the name of this section implies, that is simply not the case. John and I would have to do some of the bosses in this game so many times that it was essentially like that scene in Doctor Strange where the good doctor keeps confronting Dormammu in an infinite time loop.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
What is happening?
This is time. Endless, looped time. Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
Because John did the intro, we will go with my first Robot Master pick, which is Blizzard Buffalo. Afterwards, we will be tackling Volt Catfish. So, with that, it's time to start talking about how X3 savagely thrashed John and I this way and that for the first 2.5 hours of our playtime in-game. I decided for us to go with Blizzard Buffalo first because I wanted to see what the ice level of this game looks like, especially since there wasn't an ice level in X2. And this level really is a frozen hellscape. I like the use of the icy patches on the level, but very early on, some of the mean design elements of X3 became pretty apparent. This is going to come up in the future as well, but the enemy placement in this game is just specifically designed to get the player hit the instant they enter a new frame of the level. As such, we died a lot on this level, as we started out by exploring every corner and trying to find some collectibles before getting to the boss. Because of our time with X2, we were concerned about missing over invisible walls or other collectibles that are hidden in incredibly awful places. Fortunately, this isn't a problem with the secret finding process of X3, and throughout my exploration, I became more and more glad to have John along for the ride. Single player games like X3 are just better when you're talking and having a good time with friends the whole time.
Waste of time.
That's what my mom calls me.
I know.
Shit. Got him!
My first time going through this level, I nearly made it to the end, but while exploring and trying to find some secrets, I was run over by one of the frosty convertibles towards the end of the level. The way we play single player games in a co-op fashion is that we trade the controller upon death.
Dead end. Car. Dead. Ow.
Oh, give it here, give it here.
Actually died.
Let Big Brother John do it for you.
Here's your baby.
DJ JD on the mic.
DJ JD.
He doesn't rhyme.
Stop it. I'm super self-conscious about that.
I'm super self-confident in it.
Yes, I'm super confident. But I can't rhyme.
Is it John Downing or is it John Clowning? Oh.
John was able to get to the end of this level no problem, and he was able to explore a bit deeper into the level as well, discovering how to destroy the blizzard generator. While trying to get to the ledge above the entrance to Blizzard Buffalo's frozen field, John died also to the convertible, giving the controller back.
Made fun of me for dying, died himself.
Hey, I made progress. We've learned.
What did we learn? What did we learn?
We can blow up the wind generator, the thing that goes.
Anyone could have known that was
Anyone
gonna
could
happen.
figure it out. If only they didn't die before we figured it out.
Obviously, that's what you can do.
God, I'm gonna just strangle you and then me. Just, ow, ow, ow.
I'll do the...
And honestly, I wish I could include every single time we passed the controller back and forth, but that's just not feasible. We died a lot on this level while just trying to search for collectibles, and eventually we determined it would be impossible to get the things we were trying to get without some sort of air dash. I do not like the way the air dash works in X2, so I was hoping for the mechanic to be switched up a bit. At this point, Blizzard Buffalo became our major opposition, a veritable ice wall forestalling our progress. This boss has a few moves in his arsenal, but nothing he has is on its own too terrible to deal with. The main thing that caused us to become gored over and over again by this buffooning bovine was the fact that we could not jump over him, even with the assistance of the wall. Now, before any X3 aficionados jump into the comment section to correct me on this, just know that John and I would later discover the boosted wall jump mechanic, but at this point in the game we didn't know about it, and the game never specifically mentions it at any point. And sometimes we didn't even manage to get to Blizzard Buffalo. Sometimes the level itself just killed us because it is a pretty damn long level for a Mega Man game, something that will be a recurring theme throughout the rest of our playthrough.
Why are you destroying the... Wait, what the fuck are you doing?
Hey, I didn't jump off a ledge, okay?
You just smashed your face into... Brian saw three men's like, my face has to be in their chest.
No, they're
After wiping 3 or so times, John and I made the executive decision to return to Blizzard Buffalo's stage once we found the air dash mechanic, because of how clear it is that that is a necessary tool to have before fighting him, which is the peakest irony because the air dash upgrade is actually on the Blizzard Buffalo level, hidden in that one opening right above the boss door I mentioned before. This is actually the first time in this Mega Man X video series where John and I didn't manage to kill the first boss we chose, as even when Bubble Crab was messing us up in X2, John and I bullheadedly bashed our way through him and every other challenge in the game. Not even needing to restart the game halfway through deterred us from finishing X2. And this begins the saga of how Rayl and John passed control of Mega Man around so often, of how we died and died again, and by the end of our hero's journey, through trials and tribulations, we would learn things about ourselves we never knew before.
It's okay to recognize when you are in... Yeah, John. I've been... John, I'm happy you finally accepted that it's okay to be gay.
It took Mega Man X3 to get it through my head.
That's why John's my friend.
God damn it.
After leaving the frozen wastes of Blizzard Buffalo's breezy Blizzard City behind, we tried out John's preferred boss, Volt Catfish, and well, this did not go any better. Blizzard Buffalo's level is pretty long, but in a vacuum, it wasn't indicative of bloated level design being a trend in X3. Catfish's power plant definitely made it clear that the levels in this game are all going to be obnoxiously long though. It is on this level that the worst enemy in X3 became acutely obvious. The FF-looking Warmech enemy is the worst enemy in the game because of the tools it has and the places the developers like to stick them. Every single room I would call the worst in the game has these suckers in it, and you'd think it would get better the more and more we attempted a level, but that's not the case. Instead, John and I began to hate these guys more as the game went on, especially on a certain stage we'll be talking about more later in this review. After making it to Volt Catfish and wiping on the boss twice, John and I decided to move on, resigned to our fate as nomadic vagrants, constantly in search of a boss we can actually kill. From here, we attempted my next pick, which was Neon Tiger. Neon Tiger's level is the easiest one we've encountered so far, so we stayed on this boss a bit longer than Catfish. Of all the levels in this game, this is the one I like the most. It feels pretty similar to Sting Chameleons to me in a lot of ways, possibly because of its more flat design in several rooms. There are these dragonflies in the level with platforms on their backs, and they can be ridden, provided the player is able to jump onto onto them. In the middle-ish zone of the level, riding one of these leads the player to a reserve tank, which is the first secret John and I got in this game.
Gosh dang it.
Skill issue.
Come on. Give me a quarter stroke. God dang it!
I want this whole.
Towards the end of the level, one of these guys takes the player right up to a nice secret, the first health upgrade we'd get. Before getting there though, this is the first level in the game we've tried that has a mini-boss, which is a gigantic tunneling centipede bot. John loves fighting robot insects, being such a buggy boy himself.
Hey, you guys. They're like, oh, he's got slapped in the back of the head. He's getting buggy. Just
The levels in X3 being so long essentially makes them massive drains on energy and health reserves the player may have, something John and I realized pretty early on in our failed attempts on Blizzard Buffalo and Volt Catfish. It was on Neon Tiger's stage that we picked up on the fact that X3 does not allow the player to grind for health pickups. It wasn't something we noticed before because we didn't have a reserve tank in the bank, but after getting one on this stage, John and I started trying to fill it so that we could use it to maybe eke out a victory over Neon Tiger. In general, health pickups are incredibly rare, but enemies essentially never drop health after they've been killed once. For some reason, the game just preferred me sometimes to John, and would actually give me some nice health drops.
I get health. John doesn't get health.
fuck you, Brian.
All right, John, play this boss.
yeah, fucking give me that control.
You can fight this guy. I don't want to fight this guy anymore.
Oh, okay, I see. So you're just gonna word as like, just like, you know, I don't feel like it.
Hey, John, I will remind you of how you made me fight the launch octopus the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Because you gave up on launch octopus. I think I'm permitted to make you do one boss. Because I don't want to deal with it anymore.
Why do you get the health? Fucker!
The game likes me. Oh! The game likes me.
Get fucked.
You know what? I wonder, Johnny. I wonder if I can farm. Oh, look at that! Oh, look at me farming, John.
God fucking damn it.
Don't you wish you were meat farming right now? Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Oh man.
Oh boy.
Look at me farming on the big guy. Oh man, John, it's so cool to farm on the big guy. Except I
any more health.
Anyway, I get bored farming.
Oh,
So.
you got bored. Oh no, it's not because you get any results when you were farming him.
I'm just saying, I got 4 health pickups in my playthrough. John gets 0 in his playthrough. So I think
you're just proving my point. The game just doesn't like.
I think this proves something.
You knew about that, Brian.
I think this proves something. I haven't seen it in a while.
Which is.
I don't know.
My point? No clue.
John was able to pick.
I suspect the developers did this because they would have known about how abusable the reserve tanks are in X and X2 by the time development began in this game, and decreasing the health drops in the level, while also arbitrarily making the levels more difficult, nerfs the usability of reserve tanks. I mean, you can still grind them to full by repeating levels over and over again, but I don't have the patience to do that, and John and I only have a set amount of time allotted to play this game together in a couch co-op context like this. Neon Tiger is also not too bad of a boss, and we thought that if we could get a good cycle of attacks from him, we'd be able to at least beat him since his design doesn't seem to necessitate the use of an air dash. And we did come close a few times, but it really came down to the way he chose to shoot at us with his tail. With a proper smooth cone formation, we'd be able to hit him with ease, and on several attempts we were able to script him into the same attack loops, nearly achieving success at several points. Eventually though, we just had enough of fighting this guy and moved on to Toxic Seahorse.
So his two position, he can be in the middle, he can be in the sides.
Oh my gosh, keeps pouncing right on me.
So if you stand in that 1/3 of the stage, you're safe.
Man, he got me good. He just kept getting me right when I was like.
God, there's not enough lives,
here.
man. Can we just go somewhere else? I honestly am tired of fighting this boss.
All right, we can. Yeah. The level is just kind of annoying to get through, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting a general feeling that this one we might actually just need to just kind of like collect some of the collectibles accessible to us.
But we didn't get far with this one because we couldn't figure out how to make a particular jump in the level, a jump that necessitates the use of the boosted wall jump John and I still hadn't realized we could do. And this is more or less the way each level would go. After Toxic Seahorse came Tunnel Rhino, and after him Blast Hornet. Getting bored with Hornet's level, we moved on to Gravity Beetle, and finally Crush Crawfish. It was at the end of Crush Crawfish's level that our third eye opened. You see, at the end of this level, there's this jump that is only completable with an air dash or a boosted wall jump. We knew there had to be some way out of here with the toolkit we had available, so since John is the better platforming player, I watched John experiment with X3's movement systems, and eventually he discovered entirely on his own how to do the boosted wall jump ability. With this, we walked into Crush Crawfish's boss room, died, and gained a new lease on life. With this new skill, we could circle back to where our journey began and finally bag the bison. With the new knowledge of the boosted wall jump, John and I decided to return to Blizzard Buffalo's level because we were now able to jump over his dump truck body.
Damn, boy, he's thick! Boy, that's a thick-ass boy! Damn!
Making his boss fight actually doable. Rushing right to the boss door, I had to practice the boosted wall jump a bit. You see, I had a particularly difficult time trying to get this mechanic to work, but I figured out an easy way to consistently get it to activate. Essentially, I'd waterfall the activation. By allowing my thumb to slip right off the circle button and onto the X, I could get this jump to trigger 100% of the time. It turns out though that this mechanic isn't actually needed to access the opening above Blizzard Buffalo's boss door, because you actually just need to mosey right up to the ledge nearest to it and do a quick boost jump over to that opening, which made John and I facepalm with dumbfounded embarrassment. Our suffering in this game would have been far less extensive if we had just realized this, because the upgrade hidden up here is the air dash boots. Blizzard Buffalo's level and the Blizzard generator were just one big red herring and pulled our attention away from this hole, and to be honest, we did both forget about it for an hour or so of our constant soul-crushing failures. Now, with the boots upgrade under our belt, we started to experiment with the new tool, and it was fairly early on that I realized we could not only activate the air dash with the press of the circle button, but we are also able to air dash straight up. This is an amazing, awesome mechanical change from X2. As I said in that review, I had trouble with maintaining my horizontal momentum while trying to hit the double input presses in the air. Changing this to instead a single circle press, I could harness the movement systems of this game far better. I glossed over a lot of level and boss elements in the previous section because I planned to dive deeper into them in these individualized Robot Master sections. As a general rule, the consistent thread connecting all X3 levels is that they are not fun. Don't feel as creative as X or X2, the enemy placements are rough at best, and are just too goddamn long. Of all of these elements, the fact that the levels are so damn long is their biggest problem. This likely was done to make the game longer, but it is artificial length, and that's just bad design. My favorite thing about Blizzard Buffalo's level is its implementation of ice and spike traps. Typically speaking, I don't like the placement of spikes in this game, especially in one of the Sigma stages we'll be talking about later. But here, I kind of like them for the same reason I like the death pits in the ice levels in Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. They just feel natural to me because of my personal platforming profile. Outside of that, the convertible enemies in the final section of the level have a unique mechanic I quite like. When they turn around, their exhaust spits out a freezing ball that can make Mega Man stall in his tracks, which caused my death a few times. Being able to destroy the Blizzard generator is cool too, but it doesn't actually seem to do anything. I would have much preferred if the development team instead brought back the environment changing mechanic from the first game, where killing certain bosses would lead to changes in other levels, such as how destroying Launch Octopus adds water to Sting Chameleon's level. That is literally one of the coolest things about X, and I was hoping this Blizzard generator would be tied to that mechanic later, but alas, that form of atmospheric storytelling doesn't show up in this game. The generator does show how this utopian city fell to dystopia, which is nice at least. Something I noticed about Blizzard Buffalo is the way his bullhorns shift to a goring angle whenever he's going for his command grab. I like it when Robot Masters have these sort of unique mechanics, so I was happy to see this show up in the sprite work of this bovine boss. With the air dash, John and I didn't even bother trying to use the boosted wall jump to get over Blizzard Buffalo. The air dash is just always better, and I don't really understand why the developers put that other mobility option in the game. We were surprised to see how much trouble Buffalo still gave us because he was able to kill us in 3 to 4 hits. With such a small margin for error, Buffalo's speed and tight windows to maneuver over him got us killed a fair few times.
Alrighty.
Fucking give up on life. I'm just like, you get a bad cycle. You get like 2 free hits, 3 hits, and you're just like, well, there goes my health.
Well, I guess I'll die.
I guess I'll die.
While he never managed to kill us with it, the massive chilling Kamehameha in his second phase threw us for a loop for a second there. His most dangerous move though is his ice spike attack he shoots from off screen. This is a scary attack because it can be awkward to clear the ice spike off of the wall with enough time spare to still jump over the charging bull rush of the boss. Eventually though, John shattered this frozen Bovidae, earning us our first weapon. Coincidentally, this weapon would also happen to be the exact one we wanted first, though we didn't know that yet.
Hit him, you shit-eating
Oh my
piece of
God.
garbage. I'm Mega Man! Has a bowl of shit. Thank God he's dead.
The Frost Shield is the weapon reward for blasting this bison to bits, and weirdly enough, the base version of this is a rocket. The shield part of the Eye Shield weapon is only available via the overclocked version of the weapon, which we won't have access to for a while yet. The Nintendo-mandated wireframe technology rears its stringy skull again in X3 via the weapon reward briefing, which is kinda cool. I never hated the wireframe sections of X2, but I also don't think these things improve the visuals of this game at all. If anything, the wire-framed pseudo 3D look of things like this clash with the otherwise beautiful sprite work of the game. With our first boss down at last, John got to pick our next boss. Unlike our first time rotating through the levels in this game, John decided we should go after Blast Hornet next instead of Volt Catfish. Right before that though, we checked to see if Ice Shield could pierce Neon Tiger's block, but as soon as we learned Ice Shield spears just bounces right off, we exited the level and geared up to disturb the Hornet's nest. Here, we learned that Ice Shield produces a health drop on kill with nearly every single enemy type in the game. Some flying enemies still don't drop health on being killed with Ice Shield, but knowing about this aspect of Ice Shield makes X3 a whole new ball game. Now we can farm reserve tank refills, and what's more, Blast Hornet stage has the legit best grinding place for health. In this conveyor belt place, you can essentially assembly line a nigh infinite production of health. Every other Ice Shield activation will produce 2 health pods, making this method of health pod grinding the quickest in the entire franchise so far. Past this incredibly nifty location, Blast Hornet stage hosts one of the weirdest mini-boss type encounters I've ever seen in a game. So this airship shows up and starts trying to load these large crates, and the mini-boss is to destroy the crates. If it takes too long, a turret will drop from the ship, but that's really the only way to take damage in this encounter. John and I thought maybe a secret was hidden in the ship, so we spent an unhinged amount of time trying to see if we could wait for the ship to load enough cargo to allow us to board it. This was just a waste of time though, and makes this one of the worst mini-bosses I've seen in a video game. Right afterwards is the best boss fight in X3 though, Blast Hornet. In its first phase, Blast Hornet has 2 attacks. It can zoom towards Mega Man, attempting to impale him with its stinger, or it can summon a bunch of smaller parasite bombs. Neither of these things are especially difficult to dodge, but I just like the general game flow of this boss, especially when it enters its second phase. The second phase adds the Blast Hornet's ability to send out a homing Hornet kamikaze bomber, while also shifting the Blast Hornet's movement into a consistent, quick pretzel shape. The parasite bomb we got from Blast Hornet's sweltering corpse allows us to shoot out sticky bombs that attach to whatever it hits, and after a short delay, it'll detonate. Once overclocked, the weapon turns into an auto-launching and locking on honing Hornet missile array. This weapon is pretty great at destroying enemies in precarious positions, as we'll discuss more in the Sigma Stages block of this review. My favorite thing in the world is when I go to McDonald's, order a cheeseburger with no onions, pay, and leave after giving the drive-thru workers a "have a nice day," only to discover that instead of my cheeseburger with no onions, I actually got a hamburger with no cheese and double onions. And this situation is analogous to our experience with Volt Catfish's level, as we spent most of our time here getting catfished into fighting other bosses instead of the one we ordered.
I'm gonna call this section "Getting Catfished" because we keep running into the other things instead of the catfish.
We actually, honestly, yeah. But, like,
Firstly, John and I noticed a previously inactive elevator was now working, so we took it down only to come face to face with Vile in a right armor suit. Knocking him out of the armor is pretty easy, and afterward, John tore Vile a new one. This creates an escape sequence that was honestly super stressful to watch. Since we didn't have access to his weakness yet, Vile technically escaped, which is something John and I will rectify later on in this playthrough. With 2 seconds on the clock, John managed to get out of there. After wiping on Volt Catfish, John and I encountered Bit on our next route through this level, and killed him pretty easily with his Ice Shield weakness. Bit throws out these galactic donut things, and does these horizontal dash attacks. These two things did mess us up a few times, but once he was dead, the path to Volt Catfish was laid right open. And with this level, I just have to ask the question again, why does everything in this game do so much damage?
Those do so much damage. Why does everything in this game do so much damage?
and then they also give you no health.
Nothing drops health, everything deals massive damage. Why is this? Why is this the design of the game? All the bosses, massive damage. Big chongus, mega chongus damage. And
Ryan,
no
Ryan,
health.
Ryan, go back, you dumb fucker. You could have farmed fucking energy.
You know you can't farm energy. You know this already, John.
Yes, you can. You can't farm health, but you can farm energy.
You can't farm anything. They don't drop anything anymore. We've already done this. We went over this.
Like, the damage of just everything in this game makes me feel like I'm going to have an aneurysm because the levels are such a drain on health and lives, that by the end, John and I only have 1 or 2 lives in order to fight the boss with.
And you have to do it in 1C clear because there's no thing right before him.
And I don't know how this always seems to happen, but the way it typically worked out for us in this game is that I would be stuck playing through the level, would die on my first attempt at the boss, and then John would end up fighting the boss.
I'll just fill tank on my run and then John fight the boss. It's the way we played Mega Man.
And then John fails inevitably.
I don't know. I would not try the second phase.
Yeah, I think John might have had it, except John was dumping super weapon into the second phase. I think maybe to try and break him out of it, right?
Yeah, I was trying to see if I can break him out of it, because otherwise I literally couldn't interact with him beyond sitting on top.
You have
right.
like one chance to hit him, and that's it.
Yep.
And that might just be the way it is, Johnny.
I think literally you have to have his boss thing if you want to have a fun time.
Probably.
If you don't have his weakness, you just can't break him out of it, and you're just not gonna, they're gonna be like, yep, you just have to suffer. Because not only does he have a phase where he's invincible and wasting your time, but during that phase, he's getting almost guaranteed damage.
Yeah, because the little things he spits out.
Yeah.
John did manage to kill this boss, but the second phase threw both of us for a loop. So the first phase of Volt Catfish isn't that bad, but in his second phase, he becomes invulnerable for a time while also shooting sparks and lightning out. There's a small window of opportunity to deal damage to him in this state, and I very nearly got him on my first attempt, failing when he was 1 or 2 shots away.
Got him.
Fuck
Cool.
you. Fuck you.
I like his death animation.
yeah. I fucking him dying is great. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Wunderbar.
And our reward for filleting this catfish at last is the best weapon in the game, Triad Thunder. Hell, Volt Catfish's weapon would be the best weapon out of any Mega Man game we've reviewed so far if it weren't for the existence of the Tornado Caster from the first game. This weapon completely obliterates every enemy in the game and manages to completely change the way John and I would view future levels of the game. The mean enemy placement of this game doesn't matter when we have access to a one-button press, kill everything weapon. In this way, Triad Thunder kinda plays like Sting Chameleon's overcharged weapon, since it allows the player to just walk not through the whole level. Since the enemies rarely drop anything anyway, they functionally are the same in terms of gameplay, except Triad Thunder is a bit safer and easier to use. The overclocked version of this makes Mega Man do a ground pound, which does damage to ground-based enemies. However, its real usefulness comes into effect during the collectible hunting process of the game. With our third Robot Master down, John and I began to really steamroll our way through the game. For our next master, we agreed to take on Tunnel Rhino once again. Tunnel Rhino's stage is probably my overall least favorite in the entire game. His stage is hands down the longest and most laborious stage of the game, mainly because of two major elements. Now, not everything in this level is unforgivably terrible. I actually quite like the idea the developers present with these muddy sludge dumpers that dot the level. The mechanic is introduced to the player in a completely safe fashion, and this sets the player up to understand how this environmental effect interacts with spike pits. We were never killed by these because of how telegraphed they are, but I like them nonetheless. The two things I don't like about this level, though, really ruin the entire stage. Firstly, the mini-boss on this stage is clearly a crummily put together section. It does a wall knockdown effect when it rams the wall, which is fine, but there is this weird input stun at the bottom, which is just awkward. Also, there is no sound effect when the boss enters the boss arena. Looping through the mini-boss's attacks is incredibly easy to a brainless and rote degree, and even the final hit on the boss isn't satisfying because of the way there's no feedback loop, either through sound or game feel from it.
Alright, he's dead.
The fact that, like, your final hit,
It just passes through them.
It passes through them and then they explode, so that's also...
That's weird. Yeah, I think
I'm trying to be positive, but this shit's just making it
I
hard.
think you can definitely tell that it was not the A-Team who made this.
Yeah,
it was not even
bad
Capcom
decisions.
proper.
And the cherry on this mucked up cake is how the mid-level checkpoint for this level is pre-mini-boss, which, while flavorful because of the way the boss destroys the exit boss door to its area, is so annoying as a result of my other disliked element in Rhino's level. The second thing I hate about this long level is the drill cars in the later parts of the stage. These things suck because they shoot constantly, their drills make all of Mega Man's attacks whiff, and they are spongy little beasts. The first time I beat the mini-boss, I immediately got killed by one of these things, making us reset to before the mini-boss, which is just some annoying design in a game already full of pretty frustrating design elements. Tunnel Rhino itself is incredibly easy, which is nice because playing through this level once is enough as is. He's essentially got three moves. He can zoom from one end of the stage to the other, shoot a pair of drills, and go invulnerable for a few seconds. In his second phase, he will switch up the direction of his horizontal dashes mid-animation, which did actually trip John and I up a few times. But Tunnel Rhino is so easy that I successfully defeated him, making him the first boss I've managed to be the one to kill in this game so far. After collapsing this tunneling rhinoceros, John and I got the Tornado Fang ability, which just shoots out this massive drill. While overclocked, the weapon just turns Mega Man's Mega Buster into a drill that drains the energy of the Tornado Fang uber quickly. John and I never found a use case for the powered up version of this weapon. The base version is pretty useful though, and the first thing John and I used it to do was to unlock the base ride armor in Blast Hornet's stage. We'll get to the ride armor mechanic more in the collectible section of this review, but there's a certain crawfish John and I need to deep fry with electricity first. I honestly don't have a lot to say about Crushed Crawfish's stage. I do really like the way the engine room right before his boss room shifts from a horizontal orientation to a vertical one. This is a cool bit of storytelling through the level design of the game that doesn't show up that often in X3. The implication is that the structure begins to sink into the water, which matches the semi-aquatic nature of the crayfish. Crushed Crawfish actually took the least time of any boss so far, but that's only because of us having his weakness, making him the second boss I managed to take down in this playthrough.
Weak to lightning. Okay, just die then.
Good job, my little canary.
Hey, we found something that we can actually have the weakness for. Finally, John.
Thank God.
It took time. We only had to fight half the bosses first.
Thank your God.
Triad Thunder just rips crushed Crawfish apart, essentially trivializing the whole fight, which I'm perfectly okay with since I don't like the look of this boss. I would hate to learn the actual mechanics of this fight because even with Triad Thunder, I had trouble dodging his crushing claw shot and the other projectiles he shoots out. But once you're finally able to match up bosses with their weaknesses, you're at the point in the game where you truly feel powerful. It took us half the game, but John and I finally got there. We finally got to the point where we're able to steamroll over all of the bosses in the game. Killing crushed Crawfish gives us the spinning blades weapon, which shoots out 2 blades that come out of Mega Man in a V formation before slingshotting backwards behind him. The overclocked version of this just makes a massive bladed yo-yo, which is kind of funny, but the usefulness of this is pretty suspect. And next on our list to hunt was a certain tiger that gave us some major trouble in the past. Coming back to Neon Tiger's level after having the air dash boots completely changes the way John and I interacted with the level. A whole room can be skipped by using the up dash to get onto a ledge that allows you to essentially climb up to the exit of a room full of enemies. Once again, Neon Tiger's stage isn't too bad, and if it were just a hair shorter, I would actually quite like it. The Centipede mini-boss gets absolutely ripped to shreds by the spinning blades we just earned from crushed Crawfish, negating the one part of the level that I wasn't a big fan of. Getting through it this time was a bit rougher than a lot of the other levels we've revisited so far because Bite ended up hiding out here. And Bite is a terrifying taijutsu master, and the way he ripped John apart reminded me of that scene in the Chunin exams when Rock Lee drops his training weights and begins speedily punching Gaara from all angles. There really wasn't anything John could do but try to discover his weakness, which he didn't even manage to do by the time he'd been killed.
Oh my god!
I too nearly died upon entering Bite's boss room because of just how insanely crazy this guy is. I play a lot of fighting games, and I don't think I've ever seen a rushdown character as cracked as Bite is in my entire life. Triad Thunder didn't do anything to him, but Tornado Fang would proc damage on him several times in a row, which grinded his entire health bar to dust in a matter of seconds. I had to burn a reserve tank to survive his DPS, but the fight was one of attrition at that point, and my damage output eventually just outpaced his. After Bite bit the dust, Neon Tiger quickly followed. Just like the Centipede on this level, Neon Tiger is weak to spinning blades, and after hitting him with it a few times, I was able to script him into a specific loop that allowed me to just rip him to shreds. Cutting Neon Tiger up yields the Ray Splasher, which is a machine gun-like weapon. Overclocking this creates a small ball that sprays bullets all over the zone for a second or two. This weapon is actually the weakness of our next Robot Master, though John and I didn't actually figure that out before the boss rush step of the Sigma stages. Gravity Beetle's stage is the most bland in the game. I honestly had to rewatch my footage of his stage because I couldn't remember a single thing about it off the top of my head. Upon review, there is one cool-ish section of this level. At one point, the right armor becomes pretty useful for crossing this bridge that begins to fall as soon as the player begins to traverse it. It's a neat use case for the right armor, but it is entirely unnecessary too. After that, Gravity Beetle himself meets the player, and this boss is possibly one of the easiest in the game. He only does 2 major things. Firstly, he shoots out these bouncing projectiles that grow in size with each bounce. As they grow larger, they deal more damage, which is a super cool mechanic. He can have 2 of these out at a time, and once he enters his second phase, he creates a massive black hole at the top of the arena, essentially making the top half of the arena unusable by the player. Touching that black hole deals substantial damage to Mega Man, making it a dangerous risk to jump at all. He can also go invulnerable just like Tunnel Rhino and Volt Catfish in his second phase as well. While smooshing this bug, John and I thought his weakness was the Parasite Bomb because it did a little extra damage to him, but this is actually not the case, meaning I finished this guy off without his weakness, even though I had access to it. Gravity Beetle is the 4th boss I managed to kill in this game, making X3 the first game in the series where I've actually managed to pull my weight on this team. The Gravity Well is the reward for grounding Gravity Beetle, and its base version damages enemies by attracting a bunch of junk into the mini black hole. The overclocked version sorta recreates the large black hole from the Gravity Beetle boss fight, pulling enemies upward and dealing damage to them. This weapon really only has 2 use use cases, but these 2 usable moments make the existence of the weapon worthwhile. We'll get to those instances in the collectible hunting and Sigma stage sections of this video, but before we get to those topics, there's one last robot master to dismantle.
It's time for the Seahorse.
So fucking good.
I didn't try.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Again.
So I think there's an interesting idea of like, when do you feel like a late game character?
The question our friend Jeremy asks here at the start of the Toxic Seahorse stage is an interesting one. When should the player feel like a late game character? In most games, it seems to always be to the mid or later sections of the game, and that's how it worked out for John and I in this game. After 4 Robot Masters is when John and I managed to start steamrolling our way through the game, and this is actually another reason I'm happy we played through this game guideless. If John and I had just looked up a Robot Master order and played through the game with that order in mind, we wouldn't have had to learn some of the boss's mechanics to the depth we needed to win. And it feels so satisfying to discover the weakness of a boss in real time and through discussion with a friend. So I don't think I'll ever play another game like Mega Man with a guide. What do you all think? Do guides ruin video games? When should a player feel like a late game character? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you're liking the video so far, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. John and I will be covering Mega Man X4 next Friday. Toxic Seahorse's stage is one of the better ones in the game, and it is the only level in the game that doesn't feel as long, despite being so. In a lot of ways, this level reminds me of Boomer Kuwanger's stage in the first game, with the way the player has to ascend this large tower structure in the middle of this sewer. Triad Thunder was our best friend for this section. Soon after this is a watery room full of turtlebots. This is one of my favorite individual places in the game, but I'll talk about that more in the collectibles section. Right after this watery well is the squid mini-boss of this stage. Triad Thunder turns this tentacled terror into calamari quite quickly, and with that mini-boss and another short section afterward out of the way, Toxic Seahorse appears with the full glory of his odd-looking design. This boss doesn't actually do that much. He jumps around, shoots acid, and teleports by dissolving into a pool of acid and reappearing somewhere else. By the process of elimination, John and I knew going into the boss room that he'd be weak to Ice Shield. I didn't even get a chance to attempt the boss because John killed him on his first try. Just like Neon Tiger, it is incredibly easy to script Toxic Seahorse into looping the same action over and over again after being hit once by the weapon he's weak to. In Seahorse's case, he always follows up being hit by a jump when he lands on top of an ice shield. John was able to just put down an ice shield as if he were making a platform for Seahorse to land upon, and this created a loop Seahorse couldn't escape from.
I shall freeze his noodly ass.
Our reward for putting down this final Robot Master is Acid Burst, which is a lob-style attack. While overcharged, Acid Burst spawns 2 bouncing pools of acid instead. While not an especially exciting attack, Acid Burst is somewhat useful in specific situations. And with that, John and I were able to move into possibly the best part of X3, the collectible hunting. The legit best thing about X3 is the collectible hunting. X2's collectathon process is one of the worst things John or I have experienced in any sort of platformer. X3, though, is at least on par with X in terms of collectible placement and how fun they are to attain. To be honest, there are several collectibles and upgrades in this game that are more fun to attain than even the best ones in the first game. As an added bonus, X3 is the first game in the X series that shows the player what collectibles they are missing from each level once they've obtained the helmet upgrade. At the start of the level, the helmet will also show on a grid map where each collectible in the level is, making the searching process even more streamlined, in a fun way. Rather than go into every single collectible thing in the game though, I'm going to focus on the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop. So, I've loved collectathon games essentially my whole life, and in the 90s, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro were some of my favorite gaming franchises. In the third Spyro game, the player has to play as other creatures in the mythos of the Dragon World to gather collectibles not accessible to Spyro alone. The ride armor mechanic in X3 reminds me of this sort of secret hunting design. The base ride armor is unlocked in the Blast Hornet level and blocked off from the player by these cracked walls that are destroyed by Tornado Fang drills. Once the base armor is collected, the player player can acquire upgrade frames for it, allowing it to function in differing ways. Throughout the game, the player can find hawk, frog, and kangaroo modules for it. And while the ride armors are one of the coolest things about X3, they are simultaneously one of the most lackluster. The developers needed to go deeper down the ride armor rabbit hole and should have provided the player with more opportunities to use them.
Out of a normal
So,
ride armor.
unfortunately, they had this really cool mechanic that they use sometimes solely to just, like, literally you get in it and you fall through a floor in the ground and you got equipment, and that's the sole purpose. You don't get to play around with your giant mech.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why give Mega Man the mech? He's a Mega Boy who wants to play with Mega Mech. Let me punch things. And he's like, nope. You got an energy reserve tank. Congratulations. Now leave the mech. You must continue walking on your 2 stupid metal legs. And you're like, you just dejectedly go.
My absolute favorite collectible in X2 is the one on the Crystal Snail stage, where you've got to ride across this empty gap with the ride armor, jump out, and use a strike chain activation to grab the ledge on the other side. X3 has a similar ride armor based collectible that essentially works the same way. By dashing over this gap on Blast Hornet's stage, jumping out of the mech, and dashing across the way, the player gets access to a chip upgrade. By this point, John and I had already selected the double dash chip upgrade, so we weren't able to use this. And this chip mechanic is probably the absolute worst thing about X3's secret design. Essentially, there's a special chip for each of Mega Man's armor pieces, and when the player has chosen one, they aren't able to get the others. This on its own is actually fine. However, after John and I put X3 down, we learned there's a secret hyper chip that is only obtainable if the player hasn't collected any of the previous ones. As far as I can tell, this is never communicated in-game to the player, meaning John and I got punished for making a choice for our playthrough based on the information we were presented with. And it's a shame because the collectibles in this game are super fun to get, and I don't know why the developers would punish the player for being thorough in this way. Telling us that we can only have one and forcing us to make a decision is fine, but it feels like scummy game design to then say that the correct answer was to select none of the armor chips because you're actually able to get a super chip that has all of the upgrades if you ignore them. Other collectibles in the game are just interesting puzzles for the player to figure out, such as the boulder collectibles in Tunnel Rhino stage or the gravity puzzle in Volt Catfishes. Throughout Tunnel Rhino's level, there are 2 sections blocked off by these massive boulders hanging from the ceiling by thick rope. By overcharging Triad Thunder, Mega Man can punch the ground, knocking the rocks down and creating a platform to continue down that path on. This is a cool thing to figure out because John and I speculated a few other weapons as being the possible key to finding the solution. This type of thing happens in Volt Catfish's level, where there's this little electronic box in this spike-ridden elevator shaft. I speculated that maybe Gravity Beetle's gravity well could lift the box up, and I was right. Overclocking the gravity well does drag the box to the top, providing John and I with our much sought after armor upgrade. And finally, the upgrades only attainable via the use of the frog armor in Toxic Seahorse's stage round out my list of especially fun to attain upgrades. John and I had selected the double dash upgrade on this stage for one of the collectibles, and on the other end of the water tank, John and I used 2 up dashes after jumping out of the frog armor to nab a nice kangaroo upgrade for the right armor. And stuff like this is so cool design wise, but unfortunately it now became time for John and I to suffer through the Sigma stages, the last section of X3 that poisoned the entire well of the game. Okay, so good games can have bad sections sometimes. Dragon Age Origins famously has a section so awful that there's a mod on PC to skip it, and Origins is legit one of the best games ever made. Dark Souls also has the Bed of Chaos, and we all know how bad that is. So sometimes a bad section doesn't necessarily kill a great game, but in X3's case, this okay game does absolutely get ruined by the bafflingly bad Sigma stages. And yeah, I know they're technically Doppler stages, but come on, it's a Mega Man X game. We all know who's really pulling the evil strings here. For the first Sigma stage, the opening section of the level is what ruins it. Right away, the player has to deal with spiked ceilings that drop down as Mega Man moves through the level. And on the platforms the player is jumping to, those bipedal Warmech enemies I talked about in the first section of this review completely stunt any forward momentum the player has. John and I learned that the best way to deal with them is to shoot out a parasite bomb as soon as they are in range because it locks them down and kills them after a short delay. This keeps us in a place of safety and makes this section easier to slowly plod through. Right after this awful spiky hell, however, is one of the wall-pulling smoosher bots from X2, and I'm pretty sure this is the only time these guys show up in this game, demonstrating how much the developers of X3 were just trying to extend the playtime of their game by implementing mean mechanics. I only attempted the wall climbing section once before giving up and deferring to John. I just am not able to hit the walls at the perfect timing to ensure an optimized climb, and you have to essentially be perfect to get through the tight timings in this section. After this, the rest of the level is pretty alright, and some sections of it, like the ride armor part, are actually quite fun and good. But because John and I really didn't want to do that first section again, we couldn't really settle in and enjoy the rest of the stage. I even kind of liked the weird mech boss at the end, and I found it satisfying to jam Tornado Fang's shots right down its gullet. We were both incredibly hyped to finally be finished with the first stage though. And the real shame of this is that John and I just stopped having fun with the game by the end of this first stage. I mean, look at what we were like while trading the controller just 10 minutes before we got to this part.
It's my turn.
Giggles. I feel your pain. Oh, I'm so sorry. It feels terrible.
I'm so sorry, John.
That's fair game. I was making fun of you earlier.
And compare this to how we were trading the controller during this section.
What in the actual cocksucking fuck? Holy goddamn.
That is actually the worst. What the hell?
Like, we're clearly not having a good time anymore, and the level is far more frustrating than interesting. For a while, the Sigma stages do improve a bit, but I'd be loath to call them good. In stage 2, John and I were actually able to use the Hawk armor for the first and only time. If the Sigma stages focused more on using ride armor like this, I actually would like them way more, because this sequence is actually pretty fun. I really wish this was expanded on more, because this stage could have been way cooler if it prompted the player to switch between mechs more often. Capping off the level is another boss fight with Vile, since he escaped us the first time. I actually like this Vile fight, and that means I don't have any major issues with this Sigma stage. It's actually pretty great, making it one of the genuinely most fun levels to get through. It does have this pretty bad snail spike section, but there's nothing here that's egregiously bad. It takes a long time to get through here, but that's really the only thing bad about it. There was some big massive room in the middle, and I speculate that us going through the game differently would have put a boss here. Maybe if we didn't kill any of the X-Hunters, they would have come together in a Power Rangers-esque Megazord fashion. Go get 'em! Right! It could be because I killed Neon Tiger, but John did have some trouble with shooting and aiming the spinning blades at Vile. The weapon isn't entirely intuitive for a Mega Man game, as it reminded me a lot of the roundabout weapon from Cuphead. This is the level in the game where John and I realized that we completely missed the zero mechanic. I was in the menus once on the level, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye the ability to switch to another menu. This second menu allows the player to switch from Mega Man to Zero, and this would have made the early phase of this game much easier to get into. It does suck to miss out on this whole mechanic, but I suppose you can't miss what you've never really experienced, right? We'll just ignore the fact that we did get to play Zero at the start of the game, so we actually do know what we were missing out on. The boss rush parts of Mega Man games are something I always look forward to, and I do like it here in X3, except for the fact that I didn't realize the metal container in the middle of the level could be hit to spawn health, so I beat all 8 bosses without engaging with this mechanic, and right after finishing this, I died while trying to continue through this hallway full of motion sensor turrets. John did use the mechanic getting through the boss rush with ease.
He had the bonus of being able to refill his health after every single fight, which I'm still not gonna be that angry about.
And it was here that we finally figured out what every single robot master in the game was weak to. Blast Hornet is absolutely devastated by Gravity Well, so much so the boss literally can't do anything to the player when they have this. This is as bad as when Flame Stag would get hit by the bubble launcher in X2 and would just loop himself into a position to just get hit by another attack. The weapon just absolutely trivializes the fight, which makes me happy that John and I beat Blast Hornet honorably in the main game. This fight would have been so lame if we had Gravity Well before getting to him, and since Blast Hornet is my favorite thing from this game, being able to experience his boss mechanics is a major plus in this game's favor for me. Volt Catfish's second phase is stunted by Tornado Fangs, as the drill essentially stun locks him. This means that his second phase pretty much doesn't exist, but the first part of the fight essentially functions the same way as normal. Initially, John and I had thought Gravity Beetle was weak to Parasite Bombs, but it was here that we learned he's actually weak to Ray Splasher, which does kind of make sense since the spread of Ray Splasher always hits Gravity Beetle, despite him jumping around, meaning the player can focus all of their attention on dodging the gravity wells that Gravity Beetle shoots out. And finally, Tunnel Rhino being weak to Acid Burst also makes sense since the player is able to then stay on the wall for essentially the whole fight, raining down acid on his dumb flat head the whole time. Because of the way the Acid Burst stays behind on the ground, it sometimes catches him coming out of his super armor move too, which is pretty noish. Even with these bosses' weapons, this is still a gauntlet to get through, so I do wish this is where the stage ended, but instead there's this obnoxious hallway of turrets to get through, followed up by Doppler himself. And this is an example of how playing this game co-op actually made the game easier, as I noticed that John was unknowingly healing Doppler from time to time.
So wait, is he healing? Is that what he's doing?
I didn't see that.
I thought you had him further down than this.
Maybe he is healing.
Oh, when you hit him like that, he heals.
Oh, good to know.
Well, I think it's because I noticed early. I think John would be pissed if he found out later.
Yeah, I would be pissed.
The boss himself isn't actually that bad. His moves are easy to dodge, and he leaves himself open to these long opportunities for counterattack. In terms of bosses, he was actually kind of boring, but considering the fact that he caps off a level with 8 other bosses, I don't think this is a bad thing. It actually is good that he has simple moves to memorize, because dying to him and resetting to the beginning of this level would be way too obnoxious. And there's only so much obnoxious John and I are willing to put up with in a game, as we'd learned with the 4th and final Sigma stage of X3. Ishin Sword Saint from Sekiro is the hardest boss I've ever fought and conquered, but he's good difficulty. Sigma in X3 is hard, but for the wrong reasons. It may have taken me a long time, but I was able to beat Ishin despite that because I could recognize that the boss's design is not bad. He is well designed, he's just also difficult as all get out. And it would take me longer to kill Ishin than our full playthrough of X3, and the reason I'm telling this story is because Sigma's final super mech form just isn't good. Let's rewind just a second here, go back to the beginning of the stage, and just dive into how bad this whole boss sequence is. First off, Sigma, with a fresh new body, has a shield and fireball shooting pistol. And with these two things, he is incredibly hard to interact with using the weapon he's weak to, the spinning blades. The idea is that the player shoots the blades behind him, and when they yo-yo back, they will hit him on the return. Conceptually, this works, but in terms of practicality, this is super clunky and just does not feel good. I would have preferred his weakness being the acid burst or something like that, because then the gameplay loop would turn into dodging his attacks and lobbing a glob of green goop over and behind his shield. This phase would take 2 reserve tanks from John and I to get through, and after suffering through this terrible feeling boss, Sigma enters his giant mech form, and this thing is even worse. For our first few attempts, John and I couldn't figure out how to even deal damage to him. The only way to hit him is his head, but the opening for doing so is so small that most of the time our attacks would just bounce right off. The tiny sliver of space to hit this guy's weak point really reminds me of that scene in A New Hope when Luke fires the torpedoes into the Death Star. Except neither John nor I have the force to help us through this. Full disclosure, John and I never beat this guy. After wiping twice on him for a total of 9 lives, we just threw in the towel and moved on because struggling to beat something designed in this way just wasn't worth the time for us. Grinding our reserve tanks to full in between each death is also an incredibly obnoxious and tedious element of this boss's and game's time-wasting design.
This guy is awful. Because, like, look at that. You didn't even hit him? How? You're shooting right at his head, so you have to shoot from behind to hit him. Yeah, so you have to shoot from behind to hit him? That's ridiculous.
Yep. You have to hit him from behind, specifically at a specific angle while he fires 5 billion projectiles at you while flying around, and he fires missiles and things.
This is ridiculous. Oh, no way. No way is this the design.
Yep, nope. X2, now garbage game. Garbage game.
So you have to hit right above the gun on the front to hit him from the front.
You can't even hit him. You can't even hit it.
You hit him from the front just a second ago. Oh, it's over.
You could have left down the ladder.
I just give up. I don't want to do it. That's way too hard.
It was getting late, and we just didn't have the time to beat our head against this boss's design any longer.
Didn't beat the game.
Nope.
Did not beat the game, and we just gave up because we have very limited time together to play the game, And to be quite frank, it's nighttime. It's over. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to come back for another weekend to just replay all the Sigma stages to try and fight this thing again. I just want to move on to the next game.
It's the freaking last fight with Sigma at the end. We got to like the first stage was just bullshit. Like you could kill him.
I don't know what else you call that.
Because literally, the animations were awkward too. It was wonderful to watch because literally he holds a shield. And okay, he has a shield. And it's Sigma, so you're hoping it's going to be something cool, like he pulls a sword and he's going to start fighting you. No, Sigma begins to start twitching as if he's having a seizure, and goes, shield down, pulls the thing, fires fireball, puts shield up, fireball, shield.
Each fireball does like 4 pips of damage,
It's
too.
4 pips of damage. When the fireball shoots, it then goes to the wall and goes straight up, so you can't escape from there. And
You have to, it's like weaving the launch octopus missiles, except you have no room for error.
there's no room for error, and he fires every, 1 second. He's like, fire,
Yeah.
fire. And guess what? Every time he's firing, he is putting a shield up between each fire, so that blocks everything. So you have to get above him. So of course the weakness is a weapon that goes up and around, which is the spin blade, which wonderfully does double 2 pips of damage. Issue is you have to be close to the guy who's freaking having a seizure with a flamethrower and then you have to
So yeah, we gave up on X3, making it the first game in this video series where we don't beat the game. John's 30 and I'm going to be there myself in a month. So we have to prioritize our time in ways that provide us the most out of our hangouts. And moving on to next 4 the next time we get together is just far more appealing than finishing this Sigma fight or restarting the game to ensure we could get the hyper chip.
There were some positive things, negative things. It's literally the Sigma one just kind of poisoned the water, poisoned the well.
And while the response to my final question is probably quite clear by now, I always end my reviews by answering, will this game make my top 100 of the decade of its release? If it weren't obvious from the last section, Mega Man X3 will not be making my top 100 of the 90s. That top 100 is already a crazy competitive list, so for something to even have a remote chance of getting on, it has to be an immaculate experience at a minimum. And X3, even without taking Sigma into account, is far from a super polished experience. Replayability used to be a major selling point for games back in the 90s, whereas now the most sellable point of games is the forever infinite playability. A lot of X3's curious design decisions were likely responses to critiques of X and X2, calling them one playthrough type games. How the player deals with Vile, Bit, and Bite does directly impact what bosses they'll meet in the Sigma stages, which is great variety. This doesn't save the game though, since playing through it once is exhausting enough by the end. Even though we were punished in the end by playing through guideless, I like the path John and I took through the game. Knowing the Robot Master's weaknesses would have prevented us from truly experiencing some of the bosses, and that would have taken away any of the joy we did get from our first playthrough. It's just that even though X3 has some genuinely great things in it, like its weapon design, collectible hunting process, and traversal systems, the negatives of the game ultimately outweigh the positives. The levels being too long, checkpointing being pretty dreadful at times, getting punished out of the hyperchip for exploring the game thoroughly, the lack of enemy variety, the awful early game refill tank economy, and the fact that every single enemy hits way too hard are just too many issues for a game to make my top 100.
We gotta talk about how much damage these things do.
A stupid amount.
It is ridiculous how much damage every individual thing, and I might be crazy. Maybe I am crazy, but I don't think any of the base enemies in X or X2 dealt this much damage.
I think it's
per
also
hit.
okay. So when it comes to level design, another thing that was really annoying is the enemy placement. So in like X3, a lot of the enemies were placed in such a location that they would, the moment they appear on a screen, they are firing or have already fired a projectile to hit you where you are walking in. So like they're all traps. If you don't know about it, walking through the level is not you going like being like, oh, what's that? And then it starts firing things, and you're like, oh, well, okay, I need to be prepared. No, you walk in, you see a pixel of the enemy, and then you're already getting hit by a bullet, and you already lost like 2-3 pips of your health. That happened way too often. Way too often. It started turning into the only way to interact with them is you had to fire a projectile that had a delay. This is only after you defeat a boss, and that took us way too long to do. You had to fire a projectile that had delay, then walk forward and let the projectile hit them as they spawned, in order to prevent them from being able to hit you before you hit them, which is really frustrating because way too many of them are just literally just a standing freaking turret. That's all it is. It just sits there waiting for you to enter the screen and fire. And the developers were assholes and put them in places so they guarantee hit you.
At the end of the day, I don't think X3 is a bad or terrible game. It's an okay one, but that does put it at the bottom of the Mega Man X list of games for me. And it may be that I would have a far more positive experience with some of the levels in this game if John and I had realized that we could use Zero earlier on.
So I don't care. It does not matter. We didn't even use the mechanic, and that's why in my footage you don't see me using it. Because we didn't know it was there until we were in the Sigma stages, is when we learned.
Yep, and
So
here we are now, post-Sigma, learning that we did the wrong quest line. And unfortunately, because we did the wrong quest line, we have to do the hard-fought smashing our face against that brick wall, and we don't have 3 hours we're willing to burn on that.
I'd rather just watch JoJo's.
Rather just watch JoJo's.
This is going to be the whole theme of these Mega Man videos. We just get tired and we start watching JoJo's
instead. So it's going to just turn into like, is this worth avoiding JoJo's? And the answer
is this worth not getting John to the most excellent parts of JoJo's?
With Mega Man
No, I don't think so.
Mega
not
Man
this
X2,
time.
No.
X2, no.
Not worth it.
X3's final boss, no.
So, I mean, it's also, I mean, you got to take priority over your time,
Yeah.
and if you're like, it's not worth my time, I mean, I've done that a couple of times. I've been, quote-unquote, a bad player when I was like, for example, Blasphemous 2, the final boss. I got to the second to final boss, and that little guy in the unskippable cutscene, I was like, I'm done. And I just looked up the guy, I looked up the final fight, and was like, okay, cool. I'm good.
The game doesn't respect your time, and it's not what it's doing. I don't really understand the purpose of. Like, some people might argue a Souls game doesn't respect your time. I disagree. I think it exactly respects your time, because when you die, it's part of the loop. You're not really game overing or anything, right?
Dark Souls 2.
Dark Souls 2 does not respect your time.
But Elden Ring does, because they got stakes of America.
Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Armor Core 6, a lot of FromSoft stuff respects your time.
Yeah.
I think.
For the most part.
X3, I felt like at least at the very, very end, it was not respecting my time. X2, I felt like the middle part of the game didn't respect my time for trying to find things. And it's one of these weird things where it's not very common where the first game in a spin-off franchise or a franchise is the best game. If I think about like Mortal Kombat, the first game is not the best game by a wide margin. Metroid, the best game is the third game, not the first game.
Oh god, playing the first game is so awkward. Get ready to climb the same giant tower for 20 minutes. And then discover that there is no way for you to progress up there. So now you need to climb down the same tower.
It was a different era.
Yeah.
It's not the best game, though. Mega Man X is the best game still of its particular spin-off franchise or spin-off series or whatever. And that's wild to me, because how do you have... And I guess maybe they didn't know how good it was yet, because X is only 2 or 3 years old at this point, 2 years old or something. No, it's 2. I think it's 2 years old at this point by the time X3 comes out. So it's like...
Because they had a really fast release schedule with that.
Yes, and it's like I can see, they don't really know the long-reaching impact of X yet, because there's not a lot of quick communication between Capcom and the players with each other, right? Yeah. And they kind of made X2 before they knew the reception to X, X3 before they knew the reception to X2, right?
Yeah.
I get it. I think if these were a little bit more spaced out, maybe we would see design more reminiscent of X, because they would realize what made X so good. This is also the 90s. Like, gaming is still pretty fresh at this time, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty new. And I do appreciate Capcom experimenting with the formula a bit. I appreciate it because I imagine that this is going to lead to better design in Mega Man games down the line.
Well, you can tell in 2 and 3 the stuff they added was trying to increase replayability.
Yeah, you can see it. Like X2, I can see the idea of replayability. It's flawed. It doesn't work.
They added the Maverick Hunters. Their goal was to make so you can do a playthrough without defeating them, or only defeating some of them.
Or with some customizable, or in the gameplay mechanics. Oh, I have to fight him before this boss this time, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's flawed. I don't think it works, but I understand it. X3, I understand even more what they were going for, because it's like, oh, you can get this boss if you do it this way, and you can beat the boss easier if you do it this way, and you can do this and you can do that. I understand what they're going for, and I actually think they were like this close to getting it together, right?
Yeah.
And I hope X4 takes it the extra step forward it needs to be good.
Extra.
So
No, it's
yeah, I think you're on to, like, I can see the design mythos here, right? The philosophy here.
Yeah, it's just
On
it's just
what they're trying to do,
awkwardly done.
because it's very clear that they're trying to make X but replayable. That's what it's very obvious that they're trying to do.
Yeah,
And it's just that they mess up some core things that made X good. Like X has all weapons are good, all bosses are good, all levels are good. It just hits all three right on the.
And it's super cool because it has the fact that if you defeat certain bosses, certain orders, the replayability comes in the fact that if you fight them in different orders, their levels change.
Yeah, like when we did our challenge run, that was crazy. That's my favorite playthrough of X, because it was like I'd never fought Sting Chameleon that way before. I'd never fought Launch Octopus that way before.
Yeah.
And it really made me appreciate both bosses better.
And the fact is you can.
So-
The fact that you can.
You can. You can
Some
play
of
it
these
in
bosses
any
we
order.
couldn't. Like,
I think X2 and X3 are technically beatable in any order. X3 would be ridiculous if you didn't
so
get the air
difficult.
dash early.
oh my god, yeah.
But yeah, we're not going to be doing randomizers for those two games for sure. I don't like them that much, but I like the promise that they're like building into something greater.
Yeah.
And I can see that, and I didn't have to spend full price on the game, otherwise I'd be angry. I'd be so mad. But because it's part of a collection and I'm playing the game after it's been out for 30
you're also not
years.
a child who's playing this who's like,
Yeah,
you don't
this
notice
isn't
the
what I got
flaws.
for Christmas. This is 30 years ago that this came out.
Yeah.
They've gone on. Capcom has consistently released really good games over its whole lifespan. I think it's okay for them to have these kind of experiments, because this is why they make good games all the time, because they're willing to experiment,
Yeah.
And so I think I really do appreciate like the way this franchise is clearly growing over time, and I bet when we play the Mega Man, the core series of games,
Oh god.
we're going to see that development even more, and we might see like some cross ideas between them, because the X series and the regular series are very different. I've been
Yeah.
led to believe.
Yeah.
So
I've seen some gameplay with Game Grumps. Not good gameplay because it's Game Grumps, but it's interesting to watch as they die 10 times to the same thing. No,
Yeah.
just part of the fun.
I know.
There's a reason I watch them. It's because they're fucking funny people. But, but yeah, from what I've seen, it's very simplistic. It reminds me of playing Metroid 1 for the
Yeah.
first time, where you're just like little tiny 2D character going boop, 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 boop.
well, we'll get to those eventually though, but we want to play the whole X series first. So
I'm excited.
that's gonna be it for me in this block.
Yeah, same here. I mean,
All right, let's close it off.
And with that, John and I leave X3 behind for good to begin another JoJo's Bizarre Adventure watch session. And the best thing about that is that it's not like there's anything in that show that's going to be as miserable to get through as that Sigma boss, right?